apps is interesting. You guys know that word, and here's why. In 2008, the iPhone came out, and this isn't an iPhone Android thing. I've learned, goodness gracious. Y'all, some of you stop listening to me, even though you're not Christian because you don't have an iPhone. Just playing. You leaving, Paul? Because I said that? Apps are on iPhones, Android devices, all kinds of devices. Apps, though, became famous in our culture. They've been around since before 2008, but the reason they became part of the cultural mainstream and norm and the way we talk, we say apps, people know what apps are, is because the iPhone came out and they launched the App Store with 500 apps in 2008. Some of you may remember that. Now there are millions of apps, and you guys use them. So do I. You know, I'm preaching from an app today. It's the PDF app on my iPad right here. I use it to put my sermon so that I can speak to you. You guys use apps. You've probably used multiple ones this morning. If you came to this church for the first time, you might have put us in Google or Waze. Anybody like the Waze app? I love the Waze app. All right, so see, you guys know, we use apps all the time now. And so I was like, well, I don't want to talk about device apps. I want to talk about LifeApps. The word apps is short for applications. All right, so we have these electronic apps that we use in life to do things, to get us somewhere. I want to talk about life applications, life apps that can help us, be very practical for us. And y'all, these are going to be spiritual life apps, okay? So if you're not a Christian, I'm glad you're here. If you're not a follower of Jesus, thank you for being here. I want you to know these are things that we can use and apply in our lives that will help us. I really believe that what I'm going to talk about will help you no matter who you are, but especially for those of you who call yourselves Christians, followers of Jesus, these are apps that we need to be using in our lives. Think of we need to download these and apply them and use them in our lives. So that's what we're going to do over the next several weeks together. I do want to tell you a special note. I'm so excited. I've invited a friend of mine who you are going to love to be here on February 3rd. His name is Unique Mackey. He's at Chosen Church here in Augusta. He's got an incredible ministry going with them. We've become really good friends, and he is coming here to share about the life app of, how do you overcome adversity and suffering? How do you find purpose even when you're struggling? Now, I will tell you, his story is going to preach the message. He lost both of his parents at a very young age. He's been through a lot. And you might go, I don't know, guest speaker, whatever. Do this favor for me. Come on February 3rd. I'm telling you, I can't wait to hear from him on this. This dude can preach. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait for you to hear Unique. So please come out. I wanted him to be a part of this as we talk about adversity and purpose. His life tells that story. So I wanted to say that to you today as well. All right, here's what I want to talk about today. It's, I think, one of the hardest apps to apply in our lives. It's this right here, faith. Most of us struggle to apply faith. Most of us, really, we couldn't even define faith. Except you can, actually. All of you use faith every day, but you struggle to apply it spiritually, but you use it every day. Here, let me give you an example of what faith is and how I know you know what faith is, even if you're not sure you know what faith is, all right? At my house, every day at 5:30 p.m., everyone is expected, and there's 6 of us, to be at the table, including the dog. That would be 7. He does come. For dinner. It's crazy. My dog eats when we eat. You guys have dogs? It's weird. I don't. It's not in my notes, but it's so weird. So we all come to the table at 5:30 for dinner. We're all expected to be there. This is not a message on who should cook dinner in your house, stuff like this. I do it occasionally, but most of the time it's not me, all right? But I'm expected, like everyone else, to be there at 5:30. So, hey, if we're in a meeting at 5:27, can you be like, John, you got to go, man, all right? You got to get out of here because you need to be home for dinner. Now, if I were to ask you, my wife's name is Shauna, does Shauna have faith that John's going to be there at 5:30? See, this happened at the first service, and I didn't expect it. I started seeing, You guys don't live with me. And I think it's all women that are going, no. And I saw some men too, no, right? You don't know. Well, here's the thing. If you ask Shauna, do you have faith that John's going to be there at 5:30? Her answer is actually isn't just based, she doesn't pull it out of the air, right? What does she base it on? Whether I was there at 5:30 yesterday. Whether I was there at 5:30 the day before that, the week before that, the month before that, the year before that. If I tell her, hey, I'll be home at 5:30, and I'm not there, is she going to have faith? No. That I'll be there the next time. Why? Because it's based on my past and what I've done in my past, all right? So you guys know what faith is. Faith is whether you believe something's going to happen or whether you trust something's going to happen, whether you know something's going to happen or not, right? Because that's what it is. You guys have demonstrated faith just coming to church today. Every one of you who came here knew that the church would be here and be open today. You knew it. I don't think anybody was like, I wonder if they're going to be meeting this morning. No, you had what? Faith, trust, belief that we'd be here, we'd be open, the coffee would be going, somebody was going to preach, we were going to sing some songs, something was going to happen in worship today. You had faith. When you all came in, I watched, I was looking. None of you checked your chair. None of you were like under it going, I wonder if this is going to hold me up. No, what did you do? You just sat down. Why? You had faith that when you sat down, the chair would hold you up. You do faith all day long, all the time. You trust. When you start your car, you're like, it's going to start, most of you, right? Although if it starts to, is it going to start today, right? We have faith. We have trust in all these things, mostly because they've happened in the past. So I'm going to give you a definition of faith this morning. Here's what faith is, I think. Faith is believing, right? Most of us would just call faith that. Faith is believing, but you see a ... But there's another part, that something is going to happen, or something will happen. There's still another, I left it there for a while. I was like, faith is believing something will happen, but that's not the end of it. Faith is believing, like if you ask Shauna, something will happen. What's the something that's going to happen? John's going to show up at 5:30, even if it's 5:25 and I'm not there. Before it happens. That really is the essence of faith, is that I believe, I know, I trust something's going to happen before it even happens. Faith. For our purposes today, certainly, that applies. And that makes sense, right? Except you guys do this all the time. You had faith, belief that when you came in, the chair would hold you up. Before you sat in it, you had faith that it would. Am I correct? All right, but the thing is, spiritually, you struggle with this, just like I do. You struggle to believe and have faith and trust that something is going to happen before it happens. Because we always freak out, don't we, over things. When situations happen, we can, because we don't have faith, what? That God is who he says he is, that God will do what he says he will do, and that God will take care of us no matter what we go through. We struggle to have faith before something happens, or some of you are right in the middle of it right now. You're in the middle of it right now, and you're struggling to apply faith. So I wanted to start with this first life app, spiritual life app called Faith. And I wanted to talk about what it looks like to apply faith. I began to ask the question, why do we struggle? Why do we struggle to apply faith in our spiritual lives? Not in other parts of our lives. Well, yeah, I have faith or I don't have faith. He showed up yesterday, she did this, she did. Yes, faith, I trust. But with God, we struggle. And so I was like, why do we struggle when it comes to spiritual things and having faith? Here's why I think we struggle. You ready? It's because, listen, we don't really know God. Because if we really knew God, we would have faith. We would trust that what he says will happen will happen. If I don't know God, it's hard to have faith. That's why I struggle with it. If I knew God and what he had done in the past, I would know God and what he'll do this moment, and I would certainly trust that in the future I would know God and he would have me as well. No matter what you're going through. Belief and trust. I want to give you one example of what this looks like from a real person's life in Scripture. This person applied faith in such a way, listen, that it saved an entire nation of people. It was really important in that moment that this person applied faith. Do you know who that was? His name was Moses. And Moses was an Israelite. He was born to a Hebrew mother, but his people were enslaved in Egypt at the time. All right? They were in bondage in a foreign country. His people were. And so when he was born as a baby, he was born into that. And the king at the time, the Pharaoh, the king, started noticing that the Israelites were growing, multiplying in number. I mean, they were just having lots of babies and stuff. And this thing was growing, right? And he was like, man, what if they overtake us because there's so many of them? And so he sends out a decree that all these young children would be murdered and wipe out a whole generation. And so Moses is born, and like any mother would do, Moses' mom tries to save him, and she puts him in a basket, actually, and floats him down the river. I know that sounds crazy, but she knew and saw that there were some Egyptian women from Pharaoh's family just down the way washing and doing things in the river, washing and stuff like that. And so the baby went down, and Pharaoh's daughter actually picks this basket up. Moses is in it and says, Dad, can I keep this one? And, the Pharaoh's like, no big deal. It's just one Hebrew baby. And the name Moses means out of the water. So Moses is put in this basket. He's basically rescued by the Pharaoh's daughter. He grows up Egyptian, but he's not Egyptian. He's what? Hebrew. He's an Israelite. And so as he grows up, he gets older, he starts noticing that while he's got all this privilege, his own people are enslaved. They're building Egypt, basically. The Pharaoh is using the Hebrews to build his temples and all this kind of stuff. Moses has an identity crisis. These are my people. They're enslaved, yet I have all this privilege. And he goes through this struggle, and he ends up going into the wilderness for years and dealing with himself and God. And finally, one day, God calls out to him. Have you heard the burning bush story? So out of a burning bush, God speaks and calls Moses to go back to Egypt and rescue his own people from slavery. Moses has, watch this, no faith. He doesn't believe that's going to happen. He doesn't believe God can do that. He doesn't believe God can use him to do that in that situation. But over time, he begins to believe, he begins to have faith. Because God uses him. And so God sends him back to Egypt. There's all these plagues that happen. You may have heard of the 10 plagues. And the plagues happen to get the Pharaoh to let the people go. And so the Pharaoh finally lets Moses' people go. Moses is leading this charge to take them out. And so they leave Egypt, they go into the wilderness, and they come to the edge of the Red Sea. And at the edge of the Red Sea, they stop because there's a sea in front of them. They're like, well, now what do? We got to kind of make some boats go around. What are we going to do? At the same time, the Pharaoh says, I was crazy to let them go. They were building everything for us for really cheap. And so we're going to go get them back, or we're just going to kill them. And so the Egyptian army goes out, and you have this scene, watch this, where you've got the Red Sea right in front of all these thousands of Hebrews, Moses and all his people, and you have an Egyptian army that closes in, and now they're on this side. Egyptian army ready to kill you on one side, sea on the other. The people freak out. Wouldn't you? And then Moses, in the middle of this situation, who has developed faith and trust in God because he's watched God working, right? And it's changed him. This is what he says. Moses told the people, don't be afraid. I know that sounds crazy, right? In the middle of that situation, can you imagine that's your leadership point? Don't be afraid, right? Just stand still and see the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. I've always thought, you've maybe never heard this, I'm not sure. I've always thought this is one of the greatest examples of faith that I've ever seen in my life. Because Moses didn't know what God was going to do. He just believed that God would do something before it happened. He wasn't sure what that looked like. He wasn't sure. In fact, the next line, if you want to read on, I don't have it up here, but you can read on. God's like, hello, Moses, let's get moving. Put your staff up. Let's open the sea. And the sea opens up, and all the Israelites go across it, and then it crashes down on the Egyptian army. And they end up in the promised land sometime later. See, the people couldn't see what Moses saw. Why? What was the difference? Moses had what? Faith. And faith for Moses was applied, watch this, not second, not third, not after every option he thought of. It was applied what? First. So if I could call this first app something, I'm not sure I'm going to name them all, but I would call this the Faith First app. What would it look like in your life if instead of applying faith second, third, as your final option, I do that, do you guys? Moses did. But at this point, he trusted God enough that he applied it what? First. What would happen in the middle of situations, even before situations, if you applied faith first? John, that's so hard. Yep. Welcome to the Christian life. We make it way too easy sometimes, church. It is not easy. You believe some crazy stuff if you're a Christian. You believe that God came to this earth as a baby. You believe that God gave his life on a cross. You believe that a dead man was raised to new life on the third day and went back to be with God and will take all of us who believe in him too, who have faith in him too, to do what? Be with him as well. I'll tell you, this has been real to me this week as I think about Shaylin, as I think about this child our church just lost. Do you have faith? Will you apply that faith? See, have you ever heard the saying, man, I'll believe it when I see it? Who's ever heard that? Let me tell you something. This is why being a Christian's not easy. Because faith isn't, I'll believe it when I see it. That's easy. Faith is, I'll see it when I believe it. Some of you are like, whoa, wait. Take that home with you. Let it sink in. Well, I haven't seen it yet. Neither did Moses. Yet he applied faith. Trust before it even happened that God was God and would work. I would say this, even if they wiped them out, he knew God would take them to be with him in heaven. Crazy. Somebody told me between services, see, you get better stuff at the second service. Because I learned some things. Bob Holler, who speaks here, told me that the word for basket that Moses was put in is the same word used for ark that Noah built. Everybody thought Noah was crazy. And then it started to rain. And he had faith that God was God and would rescue him and his family. I quote verses and talk about verses a lot that actually I don't like very much anymore. Can I be honest with you? Do y'all like honesty? You want an honest preacher? You want me to act like this next verse? I want to share with you a verse that is, I don't like it. Psalm 119. You're like, what, man? That's the wrong verse. That's an awesome verse. All right, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. Let me tell you what that means. What that means is you don't have to see very far. You only have to see the next step. What you're saying when you say, okay, I believe in God, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, what you're saying is, I don't get to see a destination. I just get to see the next step. That's all God wants from me. He won't shine a light far down the road. Why? Because you won't have faith. He wants you to see it before you see it. And that's faith. So he shines a light right there, and he's like, will you step? You're like, oh, I don't know. Some of you are going through this step. And then you see the next step, don't you? Step. This is the Christian life. And so, what are you going through right now? Whatever you were thinking of all throughout this message, as I talk about this, what are you going through? What is that situation? Will you apply faith first in that situation?